I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual now. 起立，面上佛堂，参加先鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各位的传世一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
Well, good morning, everybody. Forgive me, I wasn't here last week, and you can still probably hear the remnants of it in my voice. I had a monster cold and completely lost my voice last week, so it would have been very difficult to communicate with you. So, forgive the raspiness of my voice today. It's on its way out, but still kind of there. Today's topic, I wanted to, as I began to think about what I was going to talk about, usually as these things occur, I have life events which give me some inspiration as to what I would like to discuss on the weekend. And last night, I'd been speaking with a friend of mine, and I'll kind of go into this a little bit further during the slide presentation, but whose mother is dying, and she has cancer and is trying to manage the pain as best she can as she moves toward the end of her life. And she expressed an interest in learning mindfulness from me. And it's that practice has proven to be a very successful tool when it comes to managing pain. So, I'm going to go over to their house and do that. And it got me to thinking about this process because I experienced this last year when my mom passed away. And what a relevant topic it really is for all of us because it's a natural part of life, and we all contemplate it, and we all have different responses and reactions to it. So let me see what happened here. There we go. So the biggest response that I typically see, and of course have felt myself, is what we commonly associate with death, the Grim Reaper. So we see it at Halloween, and it's a rather imposing negative figure. So as you can see in the slide, forgive the pixelation, but I just pulled it off of the web. The the dark cloaked figure with menacing countenance and skeletal fingers with the scythe, and if this is the image of death, man, that's not really something to look forward to. That's more something out of a horror flick where somebody's going to come and lop your head off. That I think everyone could agree that image is disconcerting and not exactly pleasant. So it would stand to reason if this is how we were thinking about dying and how we're going to meet our own death. It's probably not very appealing. So when we look at the source of this fear, it's generally associated with our continued existence. It's the unknown. We have no idea what's going to happen. Now, there are multiple theories and thoughts about what's going to happen after we die. The reality is, and we're all going to find out, that's for sure, that's one thing that we can absolutely count on, but knowing the absolute truth of that in this existence, in this incarnation, well, we, at the moment, don't. We don't really know what's going to happen. So the more common, and I'll add a qualification here. What I share today is just the briefest of overviews, and it is more just a flow of thought more than it is an academic lecture, because there is a lot of stuff in here. There are courses, full courses in this subject matter. There are thousands of books. There are lifetimes of contemplation spent on this very subject. So to assume that I could even begin to touch that in a half hour is a little absurd. So if you'll just kind of accept the fact that this is more of a random stream of consciousness than it is a comprehensive overview of death and life after death, then, whoa, there's my dog. And then I think we'll probably be able to be okay with the presentation. Excuse me. So if we take a look at this, the general thought process is that we have several possibilities of continued existence. One is reincarnation. So this is the I'm going to shut my window here because people, dogs and people and things are making noise. The thought of reincarnation is that we basically recycle, and I'm sure most of you are very familiar with this, and that when we pass from one existence to another, we reconfigure to another existence. A little bit more on that later. Now, there's heaven. Is there this ultimate place that we go to that is peaceful, where we leave the common anxieties, fears, displeasure that we experience on a daily basis in our current existence? Do we just dissolve? Is it emptiness? Is it, that's it? We just fade from existence, our chemical compounds dissolve back to the earth, and our consciousness diffuses, and that's it. Is it the Pure Land? So the Pure Land is a Buddhist concept where it's very similar to heaven. Which one is it? Is it all of the above? Who knows? So what is the basis of this information? Well, there are three essential components to it that I break it down into. One, from a Buddhist perspective, insight born of meditation and contemplation. It is said that upon awakening, enlightenment, one can experience all of one's previous lifetimes, past and future incarnations, to be able to see this string and this folding of space-time, how it all comes together. I've personally not had that experience, but it is said that that is something that's possible. We have scripture and canonical text, which if we rely on that as an accurate source of information, then we can have faith that this is an authoritative source that gives us insight and answers into these questions. And the third is experience, our own personal experience of what we might, with our own sensory mechanisms, understand and begin to recognize as a potential truth of a existence beyond what we're experiencing now. Now, this has been something that's been a great gift for me in that my friend coming to me and speaking about his mom. First, my mom died last April, and it was as ideal a circumstance as I could possibly imagine. My wife, my son, and his girlfriend were all there. We were all holding hands and praying and meditating, And as my mom passed and took her last breath, and we followed both Christian and Buddhist rituals. One of the Buddhist rituals is to follow an imagery-based meditation in the place of the person's death for 50 days after they have passed, and to not disturb their things or their room. And so that's something that we followed when my mom passed away. And this is from the Tibetan Buddhist practice. And we follow the Christian rituals as well, because these resonate with us. And so that's our personal choice. And it was a very gentle, wonderful passing for my mom, who received hospice care, a lovely nurse, and it was about as good as it gets, I suspect. My friend Jeff, who is actually a pastor, contacted me because of his mom, who will be passing rather soon, and she wants to integrate this mindfulness practice, part of because she's scared and is experiencing pain. So I feel very blessed and fortunate to share some of my experience in that regard, so that hopefully that will ease her pain and ease some of her suffering. And then my personal practice, some of you guys know that I have a heart condition, and this has been going on for 20 years. When I the problem was first diagnosed, it was profound and pronounced in that, man, this thing would hit me. It's a heart arrhythmia, and it would slam my chest like being kicked by a horse, and I'd get radiating pain down my arm. I'd grow numb. I'd get lightheaded. It really felt like I was having a heart attack and going to die every time this thing happened. And it would happen about every 3 weeks at that point. And man, it was just incredibly disconcerting. And I really felt like I was going to die every time it happened. Now, when I was a young guy, I, gathered a great deal of bravado and put myself in a bunch of really dangerous situations to kind of prove that I wasn't afraid of death or afraid of being harmed and all those things. And that I thought that I had that whole thing kind of worked out, because if I could look down a gun barrel or whatever and not feel fear, then it must mean that I'm not afraid of death. Well, wrong. When the biological manifestation took over, and it wasn't a choice of me going and standing in front of somebody who was going to shoot me or something like that, it totally changed the game. The choice was taken away from me, and so I was just as scared as ever. It didn't make a bit of difference. So that gave me the wonderful opportunity to work with my teachers and practice embracing death. And it has been an enormous gift for me. So when we look at those different facets of experience, they're again like branches of a tree. Insight born of meditation and contemplation, that it truly does give us insight. If we can assume that we are made of consciousness, which is kind of the predominant thought when it comes to the world of quantum physics and where things seem to be going in the scientific world about what is actually the core of the material universe. The common thought is that there's not a whole lot of material to it, is that there's a lot of emptiness, which fits in very well with the Buddhist concept of universal emptiness. If we kind of think from that perspective, then this merger of our consciousness that's encapsulated in this biosuit that we wear, merging into that universal consciousness, is it feasible for us to do that prior to losing our skin suit? And I think due to the experience of many others who have come before us, yes, I think that is feasible. And I think it's feasible for us to have glimpses into that super consciousness, as it were. So I think that through diligent practice, we can gain insight into, a broader perspective of what's going to happen after we get rid of our suit here. When it comes to scripture and canonical text, if we trust the source of the written scripture, then we can embrace this as a fundamental truth. This comes down to an issue of faith and historical accuracy. So if we, and I'm not going to get into the whole deal of the of historical accuracy with respect to Taoist, Buddhist, or Christian, or Jain, or Hindu, or whatever the canonical source of scripture might be, because that's a whole other issue when it comes to historical accuracy. But the bottom line is, are there themes, are there certain truths that seem to run concurrent through all of these faiths or all of these texts? Then I think it's reasonable to assume if we have these common threads, then there may be something to examine there. It could be a universal truth. And then we have experience. We have the experience of others, and we have our own experience. And then it's an issue of whether we trust the experience of what other people tell us they've experienced, and also our own experience. Now, part of this is contingent upon this soul issue, the existence of the soul. Is that the same thing as the consciousness? Well, that's kind of another topic of discussion. But I will tell you this. One of my first philosophy classes that I had at the University of Kentucky, I had a TA for the class, and in our section, his overarching theme for the course was prove or disprove the existence of the soul. And I think I've mentioned this previously at some point or another, but we were examining Western philosophers at the time, and we were to take the arguments of Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, and create a summary, a logical argument, either for or against the existence of the soul. Well, I didn't really get the, I don't know if I got it, but I don't think I really agreed with the general premise of the class. So my assertion for my final paper was that there is no way you can actually logically prove it. It's just an issue of faith. And so he flunked me. And this guy, he literally looked like Kermit the Frog, and he talked like him. He would bounce up against the chalkboard. We had chalkboard rather than whiteboards at the time. And everything he would talk was like this. And I have to say, to this day, he reminded me of Marty Feldman, the old comedian. And he is the funniest guy I think I've ever had as a teacher. And not intentionally. It was not because he was attempted to be a comic. It was just because he looked and sounded like Kermit the Frog. So it was kind of hard to take that whole thing seriously, but it came down to this essence, which is, whether you prove it, that's a word game. When you prove things logically, it's a word game, is the bottom line of it. And as far as I'm concerned, we're not really going to know till we croak anyway. So this is all assumption. Now, I will share with you a couple of things about experience, personal experience first. When we talk about reincarnation, as a child, when I was about 5 years old, I had a memory that is just as clear as this morning when I woke up. And it was of being in a trench in the rain and the mud and having a friend who gave me a wedding ring and told me to get it to someone. And I think it was a wife. And when I was about 5 years old, I had a little plastic ring on my finger that I picked up out of a bubblegum machine from when my mom took me grocery shopping. And there was an older girl down the street who was in my yard playing with me. And I was adamant when I told her to get this ring to this guy's wife. And I could, even in my little 5-year-old brain, I could feel the blurring of this lifetime and that lifetime. I could feel this. I knew that what I was wearing on my finger was not a real ring and that it was something I got out of a bubblegum machine. But I knew that I had this ring, that I had to get to somebody, and that it was given to me. And I will always stick by the fact that this is a memory from another life for me. Now you can attribute this to fantasy or to imagination or chemical compounds in the brain, and that's fine. But as far as I'm concerned, it is a memory of a past life. And because I can remember it today as clearly as I did when I was 5 years old. So I think this is a remnant, something that's passed through that boundary with me. And, to me, this is evidence. I have another friend who's a wonderful therapist. His name is Dorothy Hansen, who lived a rather spectacular life of debauchery. She was a horrible, horrible drug addict and a self-described crack whore. And she died multiple times from drug overdoses. And the time that she stayed out the longest was about 7 minutes, I think, 7 or 9 minutes. And in that time, she said that she experienced a disengagement from her body where it was she described the tunnel and light, and that she was a small globe of light that was moving toward this immense light. And all that she felt was pure love. And that all of these other little globes of light moving toward this immense light were all individual pieces of our consciousness. And I have no reason to refute what she said. Yes, I know the arguments. I know about chemical compounds that ease us into the process of our death. And that very well may be the case. But based on her experience, I believe what she said. Now, if we kind of follow the path of reincarnation, the general process or general scheme of that process is that through these gradients of evolution, we ascend to higher levels of understanding, consciousness, and finally we dissolve into emptiness. Someone who is considered a bodhisattva chooses to return in order to pass on, to alleviate the burden and the suffering of others. But we have a choice. Somehow in our individual consciousness that we have that choice. If you look at most of the thought process with regard to heaven particularly when it's viewed as a reward of some type. It's a one-shot deal. You go up or you go down based on the actions that you take in this lifetime, and that's kind of it. So that's many people believe that's sort of a one-shot deal, and this may be the case also. I'm not sure. There is a book called Proof of Heaven, where a neurosurgeon named Evan Alexander contracted bacterial spinal meningitis, and his brain was shut down in a manner in which the portion of the brain which is responsible for imagery, dreams, hallucinations was dead, completely shut down. And I would suggest that you grab the book off of Amazon and give it a read if you would like further in-depth detail about that, because he provides it, because he is a neurosurgeon and knows much more about it than I. And yet he had this enormous post-death experience. And the three primary truths that he came back with, these messages, were: you are loved and cherished dearly forever, you have nothing to fear, and there is nothing you can do wrong. Now there's a qualification for there's nothing that you can do wrong, meaning that I suppose we certainly can do something wrong, like murder someone else, but we can't do anything wrong with respect to just the life choices that we make that lead us down one road or another. We're not going to be judged for that, and that is just our evolution, our process. Now, his description of this process as he moved into different realms of consciousness is very similar to what we examine as what's referred to as the Bardo in Tibetan Buddhism. And the Bardo is considered a transitional state that is filled with frightful images and sounds. Now, Alexander referred to this as the realm of the earthworm's eye view, because he said it felt like being deep, deep, deep in the earth. And there was no sense of passage of time, almost as though one has been there forever, but yet just a moment. And that there were these frightening images and sounds. And one could extrapolate that this may be a similar experience to limbo that one hears about in Catholicism. So what's taught in Tibetan Buddhism is that these frightening images and sounds are all manifestations of our own mind and can be transformed into peaceful images if we remember and we train ourselves in advance to know that as we pass from this state to the next. So there are methods by which one does this, but kind of the overarching theme is that we embrace it, that we practice our death, that we imagine it fully and completely, and we build a practice so that it's habitually anchored in our consciousness, so that we will default to that when we lose the body and our consciousness continues. So that we embrace death, we practice remaining calm, we fill our minds with positive, peaceful images, and we learn to be with death. And when the opportunity arises, that we comfort those who are near death. Now we very often, and because we're scared of it, we want to kind of deny it. Don't want to be around it. Ugh, that's gross. Oh, why are people dying? Oh, I don't want to go to a funeral. Well, I understand that's not the most pleasant thing in the world, but at the same time, having the opportunity to examine this as a necessary evolution a part of our life, which it absolutely is, as much as birth. And to not deny it and to embrace it fully helps us to alleviate the fear that's associated with it, because we're all going to die. It's just a matter of time. Circumstances vary. But I know that when it comes my time, I hope that I'm able to maintain a calm spirit as I pass through. And hopefully that will allow me to move forward unencumbered to whatever the next level is, and to truly embrace and be at peace with that. So that's my spiel for today. I hope you guys found something useful in it, and I'm looking forward to hearing Derek.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much for that.
Oh, there's an echo.
Oh, there's an echo.
Ed, I'll turn off the microphone.
I'll turn off the microphone. Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that. Sometimes there's an echo because the sound of my voice comes out of your speakers and into your microphone. So let me say, Ed, quite a few things to think for me in your talk. First of all, there's synchronicity once again in this particular meeting. So when I talk about synchronicity, a lot of times interesting coincidences happen, and if it happens a couple of times, you would not pay special attention to it, because we do encounter coincidental occurrences frequently in life. If, on the other hand, it keeps on happening, then you begin to think that this is not what one might usually expect. So when you travel the path of the Tao, one of the significant signposts is that you keep running into incredible synchronicities all the time. It's like rolling a die, getting a 1, and you think, okay, well, that's 1 chance out of 6. That's not so unusual. Now you roll 2 dice and you get snake's eyes, and you do a little mental calculation and you figure, okay, well, that's 1 chance out of 36, so it's a lot less likely, but it could happen. If I keep rolling 2 dice, eventually I'll get that. Now if you roll 3 and you get 1s on all of them, then you start to figure out, well, okay, mathematically that's maybe 1 out of roughly 200, so even less likely. 4 dice, 5 dice, 6 dice, the probabilities keep piling on, and eventually you get to a point and you say that, okay, well, there's something else happening here, because if I'm this lucky buying a lottery ticket, I will already be extremely wealthy. Now, so the synchronicity that I want to talk about specifically, Ed, is that you are speaking of life and death today. You are talking about reincarnation, which is a question that was just asked on Facebook, in the Facebook group. Now, I happen to know, Ed, that you are so busy that you don't really have time to visit that Facebook group to see what's going on, so you probably are not aware that this is a question that's been asked just recently. So you are probably unaware that I was planning to address that question today. And it wasn't only just Facebook. A week before last week, during lunch, in person, I was asked that question as well in a slightly different way. Question that was asked on Facebook was, what is the Taoism perspective on reincarnation? The question that was asked in person to me was, Derek, what is your personal view on reincarnation? So I definitely plan to talk about that. So I was aware that you had no idea this was going on, so it was kind of funny and interesting that you went into this topic today. And when it comes to spirituality, religion, and so forth, Ed, I think you're already aware that I am more of a more of an agnostic orientation, which is surprising to many people. At the same time, I think as long as you have known me for years, I have maintained the utmost respect for all religious traditions. Out where you're at in Valencia, there's definitely a very strong presence of Christianity, and I think you are unique in your training center in melding the best of East and West, in combining the two together in sort of a very remarkable and beautiful fusion. So you're very comfortable, Ed, talking about prayers, but also at the same time quite comfortable getting into meditation. And I can offer everyone, and I know people who are listening in today, and people who later on will be looking at the YouTube video recording. Many come from that background as well, and many have gone into all different spiritual paths of the world to see what humanity has to offer. So I want to provide everyone with what I think is a very nice fusion of the two. When you think about prayers and meditation, okay, there's always going to be fundamentalists who will be adamantly opposed to one or the other. But I think that people who are interested in what we talk about in these meetings are comfortable with both. And I can offer the union of both, that there's nothing wrong with keeping both practices. Why? From the Christian perspective, when you pray, you are speaking to God. When you meditate, you are listening to God. So communication with God should not be a one-way street. So those who are open to keeping both kinds of practices in their lives, I would say more power to you. Now, I also want to tell people that some of you don't know Sifu Ed, so I'll just kind of let you know a little bit about his background. He's very low-key when he talks about himself. He'll talk about himself in his younger days, and he'll talk about, yeah, I was kind of a headstrong young man, etc. Just so everyone knows, when he was younger, he was, I would say, I didn't know him back then, but just listening to him talk about his past and then, getting to know people that knew him back in those days, I'll probably just, I'll tell you, it's not going to be too far from the mark. He was probably one of the most macho guys, that you come across. Real strong, real fast. He was a fighter, but that fighting career came to an abrupt end when he had the heart condition that he was just telling you about. So this is the reason why I find Ed to be inspirational, because, as he says, he's had practice with dying for 20 years. So, I myself think about what he must have gone through, and I know that he has to be very strong, not just physically as he was before, but also emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, to have gone through the last 20 years in that condition. And how ironic is it that, this guy who saw himself as being just at his prime in terms of strength and physical prowess, suddenly taken down by this failing of the human body. How ironic is that? There's a lesson in there. And it's all the more remarkable if you don't let it take you down, if you don't let it defeat you. So, having said that, so Ed, I'm just turning your microphone back on just in case you wanted to say anything. And I want to offer to you the feedback from the people who are connected online, from Mike, great talk. From Tim, this was a great presentation, Ed, very poignant. And then from Waku, powerful and very timely message, especially today. Thank you. And Waku, I think I know what you are referring to. Indeed, every day, especially when we encounter tragic news, we come face to face with this big question, the question of life and death. Not just our own, but also the tragic death of of many people out there, sometimes untimely death. So I think the Tao can help us greatly, and that's certainly what I want to get into with everyone today. So Ed, I'm going to switch the presentation back to my side and continue on with the topic that I have planned for today. Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架规则是一鞠躬，接班一鞠躬。Okay, everybody, we are done.
Participate in the Tao meeting by joining us online. For information, go to taoism.net/Tao